At first glance, Jamaica may appear to the world as just another postcard-perfect Caribbean island, a place of blue waters, reggae rhythms, and endless sunshine. But beneath that laid-back image lies something far more powerful. Geographically, Jamaica is one of the most strategic islands in the entire Western Hemisphere. Sitting right at the crossroads of the Americas, this small nation rests along some of the most vital shipping lanes on Earth. Lanes that connect the Atlantic Ocean to the Panama Canal and, ultimately, to the booming markets of Asia. Kingston Harbor, one of the largest natural harbors in the world, stands as the beating heart of this strategic advantage. Surrounding it are some of the Caribbean's most advanced shipping terminals, making the island not just a stopover point, but a genuine gateway for global trade. To understand Jamaica's global significance, you have to picture it as a bridge, a floating midpoint between North and South America, between the Atlantic and Pacific, between old powers and rising ones. And it is precisely this unique position that has drawn the attention of global giants. For decades, the United States saw Jamaica as part of its regional sphere of influence, an informal yet firm extension of its backyard. U.S. policymakers viewed the island as a reliable friend in a region critical to their national security and trade. Washington's cultural, economic, and diplomatic influence ran deep. American companies dominated imports, U.S. aid flowed consistently, and many of Jamaica's young professionals looked north for education and opportunity. It was an unspoken understanding, America led, and Jamaica cooperated. But that quiet dominance is being tested like never before. A new player has entered the scene, one with vast resources, global ambition, and a long-term plan that stretches far beyond friendship. That player is China. Over the last 15 years, China has quietly and methodically built an economic and physical presence across Jamaica that has reshaped the island's skyline, economy, and even its political conversation. Billions of dollars have flowed in from Beijing, financing projects that are impossible to ignore. The Kingston Freeport Terminal, a critical gateway for Caribbean trade, was modernized and expanded through Chinese investment. The North-South Highway, an engineering marvel cutting through mountains and connecting Kingston to Ocho Rios, was designed, financed, and built by Chinese firms. The South Coast Highway Improvement Project, which links several parishes and stimulates regional economies, also bears China's fingerprints. To the untrained eye, these developments may seem like simple acts of partnership, a wealthier nation helping a smaller one develop. But geopolitically, they are chess moves in a much larger game. These projects are key components of China's Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI, launched in 2013 by President Xi Jinping. The BRI is not merely an economic plan, it's a blueprint for a new world order. It envisions an interconnected globe where Chinese-built infrastructure forms the backbone of international trade routes, allowing Beijing to project both economic and political influence from Africa to the Caribbean. Jamaica, with its ports, harbors, and location near the Panama Canal, is an ideal piece of that puzzle. By embedding itself in Jamaica's development, China isn't just investing, it's positioning. It's building pathways that could, in time, serve as trade corridors, logistical hubs, and strategic footholds in the Americas. When Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi visited Kingston, he described the relationship as a model for cooperation between large and small developing countries. Prime Minister Andrew Holness warmly welcomed the support, especially given Jamaica's struggles with debt and slow growth after the 2008 financial crisis. At that time, China's loans helped stabilize a shaky economy and created tangible development where Western lenders offered little but conditionalities. But beneath the smiles, there's a question that never leaves the room. What is China's true endgame? Because while these projects bring progress, they also create dependency and influence. Each highway, port, and power station deepens Jamaica's economic ties to Beijing, and with it, China's leverage in Caribbean affairs. Meanwhile, the United States, once the dominant external power in Jamaica, has found itself watching from the sidelines. Its presence, though still strong culturally, has weakened economically. Over the last decade, U.S. investments have been overshadowed by the sheer scale of Chinese financing. Programs like USAID continue to operate, but they pale in comparison to Beijing's billion-dollar infrastructure ventures. For Washington, this shift is more than symbolic, it's strategic. The Caribbean has long been considered the U.S.'s third border, a buffer zone crucial to security and trade. To see a rival power making inroads so close to home raises alarm bells across the Pentagon and the State Department. A Chinese-controlled port or logistics hub in Jamaica could one day play a role not just in commerce, but in military logistics. While no one publicly discusses it, analysts know what's at stake: power projection. This is the same concern the U.S. had in Africa and the Pacific Islands, where China's investments eventually expanded into dual-use facilities, ports that could serve both commercial and military ships. For now, there's no evidence of that in Jamaica, but the precedent elsewhere keeps Washington uneasy. The U.S. is suddenly realizing that its decades of complacency in the Caribbean created space for China to move in quietly and efficiently. This realization has sparked renewed interest in regional diplomacy. U.S. envoys have begun revisiting Caribbean nations, promising new funding for digital infrastructure, education, and renewable energy. But the truth is, Washington is playing catch-up. And in diplomacy, as in chess, timing is everything. The question haunting U.S. strategists today is whether they've already lost too much ground to ever regain dominance. From the ground, however, the story looks different. For many Jamaicans, China's involvement has brought tangible, visible progress. Roads that were once filled with potholes now connect parishes with efficiency. Ports have been upgraded, creating jobs and boosting trade. Tourism is benefiting from smoother transport routes, and rural farmers can now access markets that were once unreachable. But there's another side to this story, one filled with skepticism and unease. Critics argue that China's loans are not gifts but traps. The term debt trap diplomacy has been used to describe cases where developing countries borrow heavily from China and later struggle to repay, giving Beijing control over strategic assets in exchange. The most infamous example is Sri Lanka's Hambantota port, which was leased to China for 99 years after the country defaulted on its loan. Could Jamaica face a similar fate? It's a question whispered in policy circles and shouted by opposition voices. Some Jamaicans warn that while the new highways are impressive, the real cost may come years later, when repayment schedules tighten and dependency deepens. Others argue that Jamaica, unlike Sri Lanka, has a diversified economy and better debt management. But the fear remains that sovereignty could be quietly slipping away, piece by piece, in the name of progress. Caught between giants. Today, Jamaica's leaders walk a diplomatic tightrope. They must maintain good relations with the United States, their longtime ally and major trade partner, while also embracing China, whose investments are driving infrastructure growth. It's a balancing act few small nations can perform for long. Lean too far toward Washington, and development slows. Lean too far toward Beijing, and independence erodes. The government's challenge is to extract the maximum benefit from both without surrendering control to either. Yet in a world increasingly divided between East and West, neutrality is becoming a rare luxury. This geopolitical balancing act isn't unique to Jamaica. Across Africa, Asia, and Latin America, smaller nations face the same dilemma: how to welcome Chinese capital without becoming beholden to it, and how to engage with the West without repeating the dependency of the past. Jamaica, in that sense, is not just an island. It's a symbol of a global struggle between influence and independence. Even the BRICS alliance, comprising Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, has taken notice. In 2018, Jamaica was invited to attend a BRICS outreach meeting, signaling interest in deepening cooperation. That invitation may have seemed ceremonial, but to Washington, it was a warning. Even the smallest Caribbean nations are now looking beyond traditional Western alliances. As if the situation weren't complex enough, Jamaica may soon have another game changer on its hands: oil. The government has announced plans to begin offshore piston core sampling in 2025 to assess the presence of commercially viable petroleum reserves beneath its waters. For decades, oil was considered a distant dream for Jamaica, but new geological data suggests there might be untapped potential along the island's southern coast. If confirmed, this could transform Jamaica's economic landscape. A nation once reliant on tourism, remittances, and bauxite could suddenly emerge as a minor energy power in the region. But with that opportunity comes enormous risk. Whoever controls the infrastructure, ports, refineries, export terminals, controls the profits. And right now, much of that infrastructure has Chinese ownership or involvement. For Washington, this is a nightmare scenario. Chinese companies managing oil logistics in a nation barely 700 miles from Florida. Former U.S. officials, including Donald Trump, have already raised concerns about Beijing's Caribbean ambitions, calling the region a strategic blind spot that America can no longer ignore. As Jamaica approaches this potential oil era, every move will matter. Every partnership, every loan, every contract signed could determine whether the country becomes an independent energy exporter or a client state bound by debt and dependency. This is the defining chapter in Jamaica's modern history. The island stands at a rare intersection of opportunity and danger. It can use the rivalry between global powers to its advantage, negotiating better deals, diversifying partners, and investing in education and innovation. But this requires careful diplomacy and an unshakable sense of national interest. If Jamaica plays its cards right, it could become the Singapore of the Caribbean, a small yet mighty hub of trade, finance, and logistics. But if it fails, it risks becoming another case study in how global ambition can overwhelm small nations. The choice is delicate, the stakes immense, and the clock is ticking. Jamaica's story today is much bigger than its borders. It's a mirror reflecting the world's transition from American-led unipolarity to a multipolar order where China, Russia, and emerging economies compete for influence. The island's leaders must now decide whether Jamaica will remain a bridge between these powers or become a battleground for their rivalry. Jamaica now finds itself at a turning point that could redefine its destiny for generations to come. The island stands between two worlds, one led by the United States, built on decades of historical influence, and another driven by China's rising global dominance. Every new investment, every diplomatic handshake, and every signed agreement carries enormous consequences. To outsiders, it may seem like a distant geopolitical game, but for Jamaicans, this is about the soul of their nation, its independence, its economy, and its future. A tug of war in the Caribbean. To understand how intense this rivalry has become, you only need to look at the pace of change across the Caribbean. China has methodically extended its reach throughout the region, not only in Jamaica, but in countries like Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, and the Bahamas. From ports and stadiums to highways and bridges, the red flag of Chinese investment is visible almost everywhere. This expansion is part of a deliberate plan, a strategy to create economic corridors that secure trade access, natural resources, and diplomatic allies in regions once dominated by the West. For decades, the Caribbean was seen as America's safe zone, close to its shores, culturally tied through migration, and economically reliant on U.S. imports and tourism. But China's quiet advance is rewriting those assumptions. In just a decade, trade between China and the Caribbean has surged past $8 billion, and Beijing has signed multiple agreements for security cooperation, renewable energy projects, and education exchange programs. It's no longer a distant partner, it's a dominant presence. Washington, meanwhile, is waking up late to a reality it long ignored. The U.S. has started re-engaging with the Caribbean through initiatives like the Caribbean Basin Security Initiative and the U.S. Caribbean Partnership to address the climate crisis, PACC 2030. Yet, these programs are mostly policy-based, not physical. While China builds roads, ports, and power plants, America offers reports, meetings, and training workshops. One approach changes skylines, the other changes PowerPoint slides. And the difference is starting to show. For the first time since the Cold War, the Caribbean is becoming a contested zone, not through military standoffs, but through infrastructure, trade, and influence. It's a soft power war, fought with money, diplomacy, and technology. Within Jamaica, opinions about China's role remain sharply divided. Many citizens welcome the visible transformation. They see new roads where there were once mud tracks, gleaming bridges replacing rusted structures, and efficient transport links fueling tourism and local business. These are changes people can feel and benefit from directly. But economists, journalists, and opposition leaders are sounding alarms about the long-term implications. Jamaica's debt to China, while not overwhelming, is significant, estimated at roughly $2 billion, a substantial figure for an island of less than 3 million people. Critics warn that repayment obligations could one day limit national spending or force policy concessions. The government insists it's managing the relationship wisely. Officials argue that Jamaica's debt structure is now more diversified than before, with loans spread across multiple international partners. Still, the question lingers: who truly benefits in the end? Chinese companies typically bring their own labor, materials, and equipment, meaning local job creation often falls short of expectations. And while infrastructure improves, much of the profit flows back to Beijing. It's a delicate dance between short-term development and long-term dependence. And as global competition intensifies, the margin for error is shrinking. The possibility of offshore oil adds another explosive layer to this story. If Jamaica discovers commercial oil reserves, the entire geopolitical map of the Caribbean could shift overnight. Energy independence would strengthen the island's economy, but it could also invite aggressive courtship from foreign powers. History shows what happens when oil enters the equation. Nations blessed with new energy wealth often face what economists call the resource curse: rapid investment followed by corruption, political infighting, and foreign exploitation. For Jamaica, avoiding that trap will be critical. Transparency, strong governance, and fair partnerships must come before any drilling begins. Already, major players are watching closely. Chinese energy firms have a track record of securing early exploration rights in resource-rich countries through generous loan packages. If Jamaica's potential oil fields prove viable, Beijing could quickly move to dominate extraction and refining, leveraging its control of the island's logistics infrastructure. The U.S., aware of the stakes, is unlikely to stand by. Washington could re-enter Jamaica's energy conversation through American oil service companies, diplomatic pressure, or investment guarantees designed to counterbalance Chinese involvement. What began as an infrastructure rivalry could evolve into an energy showdown, one that decides who truly influences the Caribbean's future. Beyond bilateral tensions, Jamaica's strategic importance is now being noticed by another emerging power bloc, the BRICS alliance. With China and Russia at its core, and new members such as Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt joining, BRICS is reshaping the global economic order. When Jamaica was invited to participate in BRICS discussions, it signaled something profound. The island was no longer just a passive observer in world affairs. It was a potential partner in a multipolar movement seeking alternatives to Western dominance. For Beijing and Moscow, Caribbean outreach isn't just about friendship, it's about influence. For Jamaica, engaging BRICS could mean access to new markets, technology, and funding. But it could also risk alienating traditional allies like the United States and the European Union. The shift toward multipolarity means smaller nations must play smarter than ever. Jamaica can no longer rely on a single great power for economic stability. It must diversify partnerships, build regional alliances within CARICOM, and strengthen ties with Africa and Latin America, regions facing similar choices. While ports and highways dominate headlines, another front is quietly emerging: technology. China's telecom giant Huawei has already established a presence in Jamaica, supplying infrastructure for 4G and potentially 5G networks. These digital systems are essential for modern governance, education, and communication. But they also come with security questions. U.S. intelligence agencies have repeatedly warned allies about potential surveillance risks associated with Chinese tech. Washington has pressured governments worldwide to ban or limit Huawei's participation in critical networks. Jamaica, however, has chosen to proceed cautiously, allowing Chinese digital infrastructure while emphasizing data sovereignty. This move underscores the island's strategic autonomy, but also highlights the thin line it must walk. Technology is the new battlefield of global influence. Whoever controls digital networks controls data, and whoever controls data controls power. At its core, Jamaica's challenge is not just economic, it's existential. How do you build, grow, and modernize without surrendering autonomy? How do you welcome investment without being swallowed by it? Prime Minister Andrew Holness and his administration often emphasize a partnership-based approach, arguing that Jamaica's foreign policy is guided by mutual respect and pragmatism rather than ideology. In speeches, Holness has made it clear, Jamaica is open for business, but not for sale. Still, critics point to worrying trends: rising foreign ownership of key assets, limited local participation in large projects, and slow progress on transparency reforms. To maintain true independence, Jamaica must invest in itself. That means expanding technical education, promoting entrepreneurship, and strengthening local industries beyond tourism. The island's greatest resource is not its beaches or potential oil, it's its people. By empowering them through innovation and self-reliance, Jamaica can negotiate from a position of strength, not desperation. A symbol of global transition. Step back, and Jamaica's story becomes more than a national issue. It's a reflection of the global transition happening all around us. The old world order, dominated by a single superpower, is fading. In its place, a new one is emerging, fragmented, competitive, and multipolar. In this landscape, even small nations like Jamaica can wield extraordinary leverage. China's Belt and Road Initiative represents the new reality of global diplomacy, influence through infrastructure. The U.S., once unrivaled, now finds itself in a race not of armies but of ideas, investments, and alliances. And Jamaica, sitting quietly in the Caribbean Sea, is right in the middle of it all. This is the island's moment to define itself, not as a pawn in a superpower game, but as a player in its own right. Whether it becomes a model of smart diplomacy or a warning sign of economic overreach will depend on the decisions made in the next decade. If Jamaica chooses wisely, balancing transparency, diversifying alliances, and protecting its sovereignty, it could become a powerhouse of stability and innovation in the region. Its ports could rival Panama's, its logistics networks could attract global trade, and its digital infrastructure could transform it into the Caribbean's technological capital. But if it chooses poorly, falling into debt traps, compromising independence, or aligning too closely with one side, it could find itself trapped in dependency once again. The future will reward balance, not blind loyalty. The lessons from other small nations are clear. Singapore rose by leveraging its geography, neutrality, and strict governance. Rwanda transformed from conflict to innovation through disciplined leadership. Jamaica can follow that path if it protects its core, sovereignty. From the busy streets of Kingston to the calm shores of Port Antonio, Jamaica's fate is being written in real time. It's no longer just a story about reggae and rum. It's about trade routes, technology, oil, and global power. China's Belt and Road Initiative has turned the island into a crucial node in its worldwide network, while the United States watches nervously from across the sea. The choices Jamaica makes today will determine not only its own prosperity, but also the future balance of power in the Caribbean. This is more than a political struggle. It's a lesson for small nations everywhere. Size doesn't determine significance. Strategy does. And in the global power game of the 21st century, Jamaica stands as both a test and a symbol, a small island with the potential to reshape the map of influence across the Western Hemisphere. In the end, Jamaica must remember one simple truth. The world's attention is on it not by accident, but by geography and destiny. The island's next chapter will decide whether it remains a bridge of opportunity or becomes a battlefield of power. The clock is ticking, and the world is watching. So as this story unfolds, stay tuned, because the fight for influence in Jamaica may quietly define who wins the larger contest for the 21st century, East or West. Like, share, and subscribe for more deep stories that uncover the real forces shaping our world.